Hey everybody, coming at you live here from AUVSI in Atlanta, Georgia, Exponential 2021. So we are out here and having a great time. Unfortunately, Toni Drummond, our guest today, well, not unfortunately, because look, she's in a beautiful place right now, right? She's in her backyard in Arizona, and she was just supposed to be here, which is why I said unfortunately. But Toni, so great to have you with us here today. So wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dawn. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it out there as mom duties called this week.
Understand, school is kicking off. It's that time of year. We all get it. No worries. So we are continuing our month of high impact use cases, which is sponsored by White Fox Defense Technologies Incorporated. And Toni's got a really interesting use case going on we want to talk about here today. Drone disinfecting, amongst other things. So we're going to get right to that. And before we do, though, Toni, can you give us a little bit about your background? Because unlike so many, well, actually, I don't want to say unlike so many other people, there are a number of people from the manned aviation community like you that have transitioned to unmanned. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, Dawn. I actually started in aviation directly out of college by a complete fluke. I had no business getting into aviation. I went to college for nursing, ended up switching to business, and I got my start on the East Coast. I was working at Teterboro Airport, and I took a job there working for an aircraft management company, right, like I said, right out of college, and really got sucked into aviation at a very young age. So I was working there. We were managing aircraft. I got my real heavy aviation background and knowledge just from working my way up through many companies throughout the years. So in New Jersey, and I was working at one of the Teterboro Airport, which is the second busiest private airport in the country. So I really got a good feel for all the different avenues of aviation and the different verticals that you could go into. And as a woman, it was definitely new for me. And it wasn't something I had ever dreamed of. I never wanted to be a pilot. I never wanted to fly. So aviation just started to sink into my blood. Over the years, I continued to grow my career, and I eventually worked my way up through the companies. It was really not an easy struggle, as I was one of very, very few women, maybe 98% men during those times of the late 90s into 2000, that I was working through, really trying to prove myself as who I was as a salesperson, as an aviator, and learn my way. So it's been a really interesting journey up to this point where I started to cross over into the unmanned world, just between my history and the things that I've done in my past and how I've been able to transition into this new spot.
Well, let's back up a second, because you were
Yeah.
on Clubhouse last week, right? The Drone
Yeah.
Operations Room, and we talked about how when you were in college, you started out maybe pursuing a nursing degree,
Yeah.
and boom, you wound up at Teterboro Airport, and it radically changed your life. So, like, from nursing to working at Teterboro, like, how did that transition happen?
Honestly, like I said, I never wanted to do anything that had to do with aviation. So when I started getting into business, I went to the airport at a temp job. That's how that happened. I
Oh,
said, let me
wow.
decide what I wanted to do. I said, I'm sorry, I missed that little clever piece of info there. Yeah, I was in between. I was home and said, shoot, should I go for my master's? Like, what should I do? And
Right.
no, I decided to just stay and take this job at the airport. And then once I was actually working at the airport and I was on the planes, I jumped right in. I was working with celebrities. I was working with, VIPs, and I just fell in love with everything that was aviation. I started to learn, and I never stopped. I'm still learning.
Well, I love that. So you literally started out as temporary help, and then
Yes.
somehow made your way up. Let's just call it up the chain, right? Working
Yes,
with
ma'am.
VIPs. Let's talk a little bit about that VIP model and how you got involved with that. What were you doing? And then how
Yeah.
that crossed over maybe a little bit into the unmanned more recently for you?
Absolutely. So, early on in my career, a lot of the accounts that I were working were very high-end celebrity accounts. I was doing a lot of tours. We were doing, a lot of concerts and stuff like that. So I started to very quickly get acclimated to running those type of large events and those large trips and stuff like that. So we basically, for me personally, my clientele started to move into a very different genre. I would do large scale events. I would do people's weddings. I would send 100 people down to a wedding. We would do the Olympics where we would send
Wow.
bunches of planes out at the same time. Maybe we would send 50 planes out at an activation in different locations at the same time. So over time, I really became a specialist in mass movements and organizing and logistics as time went on. So with me, I really got a passion and an understanding on how to make things work both from an aviation side and also from a logistical side. So that's really where my expertise really started to define as I got more in depth into my career. And I began as I got older. In 2008, I ended up starting a consulting company that I really took my fine services that I had that was really expert in and brought those to the marketplace and offered my consulting service to companies to do award shows and put on big events and activations. That's really where one of my sweet spots is in aviation.
Well, you mentioned logistics and for everybody out there, I have to tell you, so Toni is one of my strategic partners and I visited her with her in Las Vegas back in May. And we're at lunch and she pulls out her phone and she's really not describing the full scope and scale of this logistics that she is doing almost 24/7 to this day, where there were planes up in the air. And let's talk for a second, besides the VIP piece, about the organ transportation part of what you're doing in your manned aircraft service. It's so spectacular. We got to tell people about this.
Sure, yeah. And there my manned aviation, I can sit here and talk all day about the different projects that we do with manned aviation. Last 8 months I was working on a consulting project, and this is kind of what brought me into the drones too. I'll segue in. I was working on a contract that came to us, a company that I am a owner in Las Vegas, called Prestige Air Group. And we basically took a medical company that we were working with, and we started transporting both organs and doctors that move the actual to go do the organ harvesting. So we started doing that on a 24-hour basis with a 2-hour window call out. And what they would do is put the organ in the special machine, and that machine would keep the organ going to help pull out the longevity of the organ and have a better success rate for implantation. So I oversaw that with some of the crew members and obviously my team at Prestige Air Group. And we did that for the last 8 months to success. We did 156 flights, and we saved a lot of lives during that time. So I was not getting a lot of sleep during that time. And I was up doing a lot of reading, Dawn, especially your Patreon page and some of the other things that I was educating myself on during those night flights while I was tracking planes in the night. So that's where the interest, where the drone starts to peak in.
Yeah, well, let's hold one because I want to explain to people. Tony actually showed me, instead of like she just mentioned, whether it's a heart or a kidney, whatever it is, instead of putting this in a cooler on ice, literally they have a machine that keeps the heart pumping and beating during this entire flight. It's absolutely incredible. And I know this is a segue, not just because you were reading Tony, but it got you thinking, right? About,
Yeah.
okay, when we get this thing on the ground, how can we more
Now what?
quickly get it, right? Not have it sit then in traffic in a cooler, getting it to the hospital. How do we get it like right into the doctor's hands? And that's part of, right, what inspired you to think,
Yes.
what can we do with drones?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. As you start to see these holes and you start to realize that there's solutions to problems that I was able to notice, and I'm sure there's other people out there that are able to notice, like, wow, we've got the organ this far. What now? Where can we better where can we improve on our systems. So that, organs, talking about flying and what we can do with unmanned technology, especially at the end when we get the organs where it needs to be able to get it to the actual, save those minutes at the end, because everything is about time.
Absolutely.
It's there. It is really there. And there are companies out there right now that are doing it. They're doing a lot of work in this medical field. So the technology is there, the infrastructure is getting there, and this is something that's going to be on the horizon quicker than we know it.
Yeah, two things to that. Number one is we had Todd Spain on last week, right, from the Advanced Mobility Collective, and part of what they're doing is, looking at this healthcare multimodal network solution. So, I need to connect you with Todd. I don't know that I've done that yet. That's the first thing. But the second thing is there's another like connection here, right, with healthcare that inspired you to get into the unmanned aircraft world. And that was with the drone, that was with disinfecting, right, with COVID and everything going on in the world, and the interesting VIP connection. So let's kind of tell that story of how you got involved, or you evolved this idea of disinfecting with drones.
I can bring you right back to the day. It was
Oh yeah,
March.
do it.
It was March 2020. So I was still in New Jersey at the time, and this is just when we had just shut down. So it was March 13th, as a matter of fact. We had just
Well,
shut
I
down.
remember, it's almost like everybody remembers where they were on 9/11, right? If they're our age. Everybody,
Yes.
I think, also remembers March 13th, because that
Yeah,
literally is the day that at least in the United
the
States,
world.
the world shut down.
Mhm.
So what happened on that day?
So that day I was, I clearly remember what was going on, and I remember trips started to cancel. People said, "Listen, we're going to start to cancel our trips," and no problem. We're only going to be shut down for a couple of weeks. That's no problem. Well, as weeks turned into weeks, as we know, our
March.
tours. Yeah, I mean, now we're talking about April. So the events that I had planned for New York City and some of the activations were all canceling. So now we started to get this little bit of panic going on within our clients. And listen, as a VIP client, you're going to call me if you need an aircraft charter, if you need a car, if you need a helicopter, if you need a special catering. You're just going to call me because I can get things done, because that's what I've been doing for 20 years for you. So these
Yeah.
people started to reach out to us and say, what the heck are we going to do? Like, are we going to be canceling our show? And shame on us. We were a little bit naive at that point. No, we don't have to cancel the show. Let's start to come up with other solutions. So
Yeah.
that's really when
Like
we started to go.
literally other
But
solutions.
yeah, we
Yeah.
had to figure out a way that we can get in there quickly, sanitize and clean. So that's really where the research started. Up until that point, I had no idea anything about drones, anything that had anything to do with unmanned technologies. So this is a new industry for me, as far as that's concerned. So I started doing my research straight away to figure out what can we do. And right away, I was brought onto a product, um, which is a protectant, the clean company. I'll talk about that a little bit longer later on in the podcast. But
Sure.
that product that we're using is a long-term protectant. So I said, well, this product, they're using it at hospitals. It lasts 90 days. It can go over it can go over the seats, it can go over the surfaces,
Yeah.
and hopefully, help us keep our entertainers, keep our shows going. So by May of that year, we had some service providers. It was just there was just a very, very new into the drone spraying. People were just starting to get an eye out to what was going on.
Right.
So we started getting into it and doing our research. So by that following July and August, when shows just started, doesn't matter what we were going to do, shows were getting pulled. As you know, the world started to come to a close. We still
Yeah.
continued on with it because we knew that no matter what, we were going to need to open back up. And when we opened back up, we needed to have a solution. So we still continued on with our search,
Yeah.
and our research, and it took, our R&D took quite a few months, but by December of 2020, or actually by November of 2020, I had started Global Aerial Management Group, because in the middle of the night, I knew it was something that we were going to need to do. I felt it in my soul, and I knew we had to provide these solutions to our clients. Otherwise, we weren't going to be able to get them back on the road safely and
Yeah.
get our employees back. So that's really where the drone piece started to come in, Dawn.
Yeah, well, let's break it down. So I'll call it three components, right? So we have literally the solution, right? That
Mhm.
you're going to spray. So let's talk about
Yeah.
that. Second piece is, the drone. And my understanding is there's not really a one size fits all solution. We can talk about that.
Mhm.
And then the third piece of it is the authorities, right? Like,
Mhm.
in other words, how do you get approvals to do like spraying things, right? So let's break it down that way, and let's start with the actual solution. You mentioned this solution is used in hospitals, that is, it covers an area. And tell us more about what it is, what it's not, and why you partnered with this particular company you just mentioned.
Sure. So, when I first started doing the research, obviously we realized that a sustainable model would not be a model that you go in and spray disinfectant every single time there's a crowd of people. That's just not sustainable. It's not cost effective for us to do that. So I believe in the beginning when people started thinking about drone disinfecting, that's really where they were focusing. And I feel like sometimes there was some companies that were not successful in the very beginning because, in my opinion, they were focusing on the repetitive nature of it. So we decided to take a different approach to it. So when I first started to research, I found Gary Wilkinson and Steve, and they are with the Clean Company. They're based in Texas. So really, what drew me to their product had nothing to do with COVID. It had to do with the fact that their product had been out for years and it had been used for actual mold, for black mold. It killed black mold, it killed microbes, it killed pathogens. So we weren't even, it had already been proven to kill that. They were already using it in the hospital. So when I called him up and said, this is something that I wanted to see if it's something that we can use. I explained to him exactly what we're doing with the
Yeah.
stadiums, the arenas, and they were like, absolutely. Can we distribute it with drones? Absolutely. With electrostatic drones, we can do that. We're already using electrostatic sprayers. So with that, it just built and built until we were able to get to a point where we were able to market the product. And it's really not so much delivery, Dawn. I mean, however we deliver the solution, it's the
Yeah.
solution itself. It's we're solving the problem, whether it's with a backpack sprayer, with a drone, with a handheld device. So the first thing I did with Gary was I invited him out, and this was January, and I had him
Yeah.
come out and spray our aircraft. So inside of our aircraft, it was really important. We were starting to get people flying again,
Oh,
and
yeah, of course.
everyone was panicked.
Yeah.
So that's how we got the start to it. And we used the Clean Company's product. They went in with hand spray and sprayed the inside of the aircraft,
Yeah.
that we managed. So once that happened, I realized, wow, our passengers are like really enjoying this. We had our sticker on the door, and they had that extra feeling of protection. And
Yeah.
knock on wood, we've been very successful with how we've been keeping things nice and clean within the cabin, and we've been flying all this time. We've had no issues. So we took that, and then we decided to take it to the next level and
Yeah.
really decided to offer that product to our clients,
Yeah.
however that delivery method makes sense. So
Yeah.
for
Well,
us,
yeah.
yeah,
Before we get to there, just to clarify, right? So this is not a chemical that you guys are using in any modality, right?
no, it is
Explain
not.
like exactly what is it?
So I actually have a statement so I don't screw it up, because of
Smart,
what I
very
of
smart.
what
I'm a
I
lawyer and
can
I'm telling you that's smart.
of what I can say. So the spray itself is a non-toxic barrier. It's not a chemical whatsoever. It's actually it's of course I don't have the scientific thing in front of me. It basically bonds. It's a chemical. It's a I can't think of the word. It actually bonds to the surface, so it's not a chemical. It will bond to the surface, and it will put the protectant over it's a surfactant. I'm so sorry, I couldn't remember that word. It's
Okay,
surfactant.
got it.
So
Yeah,
the
the 25
surfactant,
cent 25-cent word.
ah, there you go. Everybody learned that word for
There
today.
you
The
go.
surfactant sits over, we spray it with whatever method we spray, and it sits
Yeah.
over the seat, and it actually bonds to the seat for up to say 90 days, depending on how much you're going to, how much use you're going to use. It could be up to a half a year, it could be a full year. The
Yeah.
only way for you to break that bond is to
Yeah.
actually rub it and clean it off. So when we realized, and Gary showed us all the paperwork from the Clean Company of what they've been doing with the hospitals,
Yeah. Yeah. So we just
and microbes and fungi that they've had, and now they've done the testing and it's so much lower. We
Yeah.
just knew that this was a solution for us.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. And again, there's no chemicals in the solution. It's not anything you can breathe it in. It's EPA on the EPA and registered list to actually kill COVID on contact and then continue to kill microbes and fungi and everything else. So
Yeah.
it's
I
just
mean,
the right product for the job.
that's awesome. I mean, we
Yeah.
talked about this. Not only is it COVID, all these other things, but things like MRSA, which are not
Yes.
so important in hospitals and in gyms. I mean, people get actually, you don't realize this, but people get MRSA in gyms as
In
well,
gyms.
right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's crazy. And I know that's one of the areas you're looking at. So before we transition
Yeah.
to maybe some of the different use cases besides on the aircraft, let's talk about the drone, and maybe that's going to kind of get us a little bit into the different use cases. Tell us about your journey in finding the right drone, like what you're looking at, how you're doing that.
So as you know, technology in 6 months, technology goes berserk. We all know that. So when we first started doing our research, and I'll backtrack just a little bit because I come from the aviation side of things, and I come from manned aviation. Obviously, I'm a regulatory geek. Like that's just what I do: regulations and
Hello,
compliance.
listen to the
I
choir.
know. That's why we get along so well.
I know, I
So
know.
when I first started this, I was like, well, how am I going to get this done? Let's start with the regulations. So we'll go back to that. Yes, the regulations to spray outside after I started to read the FARs, the Federal Aviation Regulations.
Yeah.
I realized that we do need exemptions in order to fly the drones outside. So that kind of backed us up to what we could get as far as an indoor drone and an outdoor drone. We have two different types of more than two. We have multiple different types of equipment that we use depending on whether we're spraying indoor or outdoor. For the outdoor spraying, we need a Part 137 exemption, which basically is going to allow us to follow certain rules so people can keep track of what we're spraying, make sure we're not spraying anything poisonous, and if we are, we have the proper certifications to do that if we were doing farming or something like that. So within the agricultural drone space, there are rules and regulations that you have to follow a little bit more than there would just be if you were flying a DJI drone taking photographs and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on that too. So some of the drones, when we research, we do have different companies that we use. We have our own drone, which is a Lucid D1 disinfecting drone that we do use for some of our jobs, especially inside. And then we have other service providers that we use in the industry that have drones that are specific to outdoor spraying and have different technologies and cameras on them, so they would make more sense to be doing some of the larger arenas and stuff that are outdoor.
Well, that's also a great segue then, Tony. So for everybody out there, if you're not subscribed to Inside Unmanned Systems magazine, you should be. We're giving out free copies here. We had a special AUVSI edition. You probably know that I'm a writer for them. I do the Law Tech Connect column. But for this AUVSI edition, I actually did a piece on critical infrastructure. You need to read it because Toni is in there. I interviewed her as part of this. There are 16 critical infrastructure sectors, and one of them is commercial facilities. And that includes places like stadiums, like malls, and things like this. So Toni was featured in connection with the stadium. So tell us, and in fact, when you and I were in Vegas, that's what we were looking at. Was that the drone you just mentioned, the Lucid, the big blue one?
Yes. So
Yeah,
when we were
so
in
cool.
Vegas, yeah,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
one that we mentioned. Yeah.
that's the one. And if you guys follow me on LinkedIn, Toni and I also met up in Aurora, Colorado. There was a big veterans benefit concert, and she had her drone there on display to let people know that they had, they were going to be using that in support of the entertainment industry and to answer people's questions. So that's something also, Toni, I appreciate about you, is the fact that you're always out there educating people, especially the man community that you came from, that really either they're kind of antagonistic somewhat, at least some people with drones, because in their mind, it's like, okay, cluttering our airspace, getting in the way of my airplane. People don't know what they're doing with these things. And to have someone like you with the credibility that you've built up in the man community, be an advocate for the unmanned community, I think is really critical. So thank you for what you do there.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate that. I just want to add to that, that education, what I've realized along this journey, especially over the last 6 to 8 months when I've been traveling with this 62 pound, case and drone, um, people are just absolutely terrified of what they don't know. So I will go through the airport and I will open up the drone case to show TSA that what's in there. And I'll have a circle of people around me. What is that? Is it a spider? Is it going to shoot us? Does it climb the walls? What does it do? And then I realized slowly but surely, oh my God, I really have to start taking a 4 or 5 days a month just to go around with this thing, just to educate the public. I mean, obviously, we're going to be doing drone deliveries. We're going to be looking up into the sky. Our airspace is going to look different over the years. And to realize the lack of understanding of what we're doing here. No, this is going to clean. This is not going to shoot you. It's not going to climb the wall. So it's been a real, wow. It's been an eye opener it's just a learning experience
No,
for
that's
sure as we go.
terrific. So one other thing I wanted to ask you about that
Yeah.
was, you had a phrase for your kind of VIP to stadium service, what was it called?
Oh, our jet to stage service, jet to stage.
Yeah, jet to
Mhm.
stage. I love that you kind of created that. And so I know clearly that is one of the use cases that you're now doing and helping open up the entertainment industry. People might think, oh, you know what's the big deal? It's just, rock stars or entertainment and people, but you know what? We all need music, especially today. Like, that's one thing I think globally that brings us together. It makes us happy. I know for me, music gets me in a zone depending on what I'm trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's, going for a workout, I can't do without music. And to have live
Same.
music and to have that sense of community and togetherness, I really can't overstate the importance of that. I know you share that feeling, Toni.
I do.
Because I remember when you texted me from Las Vegas, I wasn't with you this time, and she's like, I'm about to cry. I'm in a live music event right now. It's like unbelievable.
After a year.
After a year. And it is unbelievable. But besides the jet to stage use case, people are coming out of the woodworks, for lack of a better term, asking you to help them with this drone disinfecting. What are some of the other use cases that you're doing or you're
So
considering doing?
I just have to tell you this, it's very interesting. When we first took delivery of our Lucid drone, and that was in May, that was just around the time where things were starting to open back up again. And people were, the people that we had been in correspondence with would come back and say, they're taking mask restrictions away. We're not so sure we're going to need that service anymore because of what's going on. And,
Oh yeah,
it's a
yeah,
little on the costly side. So we said, no
sure.
problem. We totally get it. We know where you're coming from. Obviously, for us, it's being proactive. It's not waiting until you have an outbreak. It's preventing the outbreak. That's our responsibility as
Right.
humans. And it's not just about the music, Dawn. It's about the graduation. It's about life. It's about gathering. It's about people gathering in general. So it's a lot of different things. So when we started to do that, we got a little quiet, and over the last few weeks, it is not getting quiet anymore. Those same people are now calling us back saying, "Hey, can we circle back around with what we had chatted about, because we want to get ahead of the game here. We're not sure what's going to go on, but we definitely do not want to close down again." So, for us, it's not just the entertainment. We have a lot of schools calling us. We're getting schools, whether it's high schools, colleges. It's very, very important that these schools stay open. And it's not a matter
Why
of,
don't you tell me, I've got three, right? Two in college, one in high school, and
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
just having that in-school experience, uh,
right,
so critical, not only to their academic and educational career, but socially and frankly
yeah,
mentally.
yeah.
Yeah. So what
We
else?
had to go to the football game. It's so important.
Oh my God.
We've had gyms calling us. Now that's a new one, because before, in the beginning of this, we didn't have a lot of like gymnasiums and those type of sports facilities looking into us. They were on the smaller side, but we've had private facilities call us and say, hey, we have soccer, we host soccer events here, can you come in? So
Yeah.
we're talking to some of these people about what we can do, and we're just now, this is a new business for us. We're only a couple months old here. So with that, now
Yeah.
that things are starting to take a turn again, it's not just to keep us safe from what's going on with the pandemic. It's just to keep us safe in general. It's
I
not just the pandemic.
Well, probably a good segue. I'm probably a little late in saying this when we're talking about keeping safe. I do want to give a very quick shout out to, again, White Fox Defense for sponsoring this month of high impact use cases, because that's exactly what White Fox does with their Drone Fox and now their Stratus systems, is keep us all safe. And we've been talking about critical infrastructure. In fact, schools are part of government facilities, typically, which is another sector. And, Drone Fox and Stratus and through White Fox help keep us all safe and keep the skies clear of those careless, clueless, and criminal actors, so we can focus on those compliant actors like Toni and turn the tide of public opinion. So thanks again, White Fox, for that. Really appreciate everything you do. And Toni, so we have the stadiums, we have the indoor arenas. You and I talked quite a bit about this idea of mold and humanitarian relief efforts, and that's obviously also something that's very near and dear to Todd Spain's heart at the collective with disaster management resilience. This idea that, you're in Haiti, and they just have an earthquake, right?
Yeah.
But, they usually have all kinds of hurricanes, and it's that black mold, it's the mold and mildew that comes after floods and after hurricanes that is so dangerous to people. Tell me about your vision for the future of what you hope global aerial management will be able to provide to folks like that.
So 100% on, when we originally put this out, we started thinking about it, and obviously we saw right off the bat, we started talking to the Clean Company. Well, their product was originally created to combat black mold during Hurricane Harvey. That's what spurred it to begin with. So now that we have a way to go ahead, and especially Texas, Florida, they get slammed with hurricanes, the black mold. It's a horrific respiratory disease. People die from it. So we really want to be able to get on the ground. I'm not saying that we'll be able to get to every single catastrophic event that we have, but we do want to be part of the solution. Even, my dream would be to have a mobile command center that we take out, that we can actually go down and just, get on boots on the ground, get our masks on and get our drones going, so we can get it in there and just help to mitigate some of the possible fallout from these hurricanes and stuff like that, to keep people healthy.
Yeah, I know this is your passion project, and you've got
so
many different pans in the fire, Toni, and lines of effort. Do you want to tell us a little about some of the additional research and development you're doing, if you're able to do that?
Yeah, sure. So I do have a lot going on, but I have an amazing team. I'd be remiss to not mention all the ladies and gentlemen that I work with between the aviation companies and the drone companies. Just absolute amazing support staff that helps me with everything that I need to do. That being said, we've all been working feverishly. Donna, as I told you in the beginning, I started off with my doing the work on the agricultural side, because obviously that ties into what we're doing here. So I've kind of been bouncing back and forth with that. I love agriculture. I love everything that has to do with precision farming. We're doing a ton of research on how to bring technology with the farming. Again, I'm totally pulled into that. In the agricultural side of things, we're doing some research on that, on what that's going to look like in the future and how we can assist with agricultural drones. So that research and development is probably, quite a few months in here, but we are having a great time doing it. We're learning, and as we pick it out, something changes, the tech changes, and we get new software. So it's been a lot of fun, and I can't wait to start to unroll some of that.
And I know drone deliveries, kind of on your mind too. And
for
everybody out there, I have to tell you this about Toni. When she was on Clubhouse, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, she's got this kind of accelerated rollout plan, like almost like every 90 days she wants to be launching something. And I mean, that is super aggressive. So do you feel like you're going to be able to make those timelines with some of these passion and other projects you have in mind?
Because they're passion projects, Dawn, yes. And don't forget, a lot of this is research and development. So after 90 days, I
Yep.
will circle back and say, here's my R&D on this. Now let me go back to the people that I've been consulting with and see if we can plug something in based on what the R&D is. So that's really what the 90 to every 90 days are, when I like to keep myself, I like to hold myself accountable to my own goals. So 90 days gives me a good 3 months. And sometimes at the end of those 90 days, I realize it's a great idea, just not sustainable. Maybe it doesn't have the economics that go behind it. So to me, these passion projects that go in sync with the aviation side of my brain, it's motivating to me. It just helps me stay motivated and on task.
Yeah, totally. I mean, still, I love that you kind of, you have a plan, you work the
I
plan,
do.
and you really, really do. And I know Global Aerial Management Group is really going to be taking off here shortly. I know you've got great partners that are working with you on all of these different projects. Let's take a second before, we have maybe about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more left. Let's talk about your personnel, because you mentioned this at the very beginning, and obviously being involved in women in drones, both of us, diversity is something that's also very near and dear to our hearts. You have an internship program, and I love that you do that. Can you tell us just a little bit about what you're doing there?
Yes, I can. And that was always part of our original plan with Global Aerial. Um, growing up in aviation as a woman, it was difficult. It was very difficult, and it could be any male dominated industry. So what I would like to do is give back to girls that are in the college age where I was when I kind of came out of this whole thing. And number one, I want to let them know what's available to them. We do have careers in aviation. We do have careers in aerospace, whether that's manned or unmanned. There's nobody in our schools right now saying, here, come to this college, here, do this, that has to do with aerospace. So I want to not only give them that background of aerospace, but I really want to make it a hands-on experience where they get the emotional support. They understand how to deal with emotional issues that may come up, and personal issues that may come up, and professional issues where you do have to use your voice. You do
Yeah.
have to set boundaries for yourself. We need to teach our girls and our ladies and our gentlemen, for that matter, what those boundaries are. So I'm excited to be able to bring that. We are working with Wichita State University and a couple of other universities. And, that again, these are all, it's not everything at once. These are small pieces of a bigger puzzle. And as we plug them in, it's all really going to start to come together. So I will have more of that internship information is going to be on my website over the next 2 weeks as we really start to unroll that. So it's super exciting.
Well, wonderful. And definitely plug that also into Women in Drones on their jobs board, because they're always, they're helpful in putting that kind of information out, not just for you, Toni, but for everybody. The other thing I'll say is, Women in Drones, I just collaborated with them on a diversity, equity, inclusion survey for the industry. So everybody go to their website, go take that survey, man, woman, doesn't matter, undeclared. We don't care. We just want your feedback, because
Yeah.
the reality is, and I think it was Mike Hirschberg from Vertical Flight Society did a great opinion piece talking about just engineers alone, right, in the vertical aircraft world, VTOL world. We're going to be like 10,000 short if we don't really tap into the potential of everybody that's out there and inspire not just one group of people, but all groups of people to want to get into this industry, this being drones all the way up to the big vertical, takeoff and landing passenger aircraft that hopefully will fill our skies in my lifetime. So again, thanks for what you're doing there too, Toni. I mean, I think it's spectacular. So we
Thanks,
just have
Dawn.
maybe a couple minutes before we close out. I think we covered everything, Toni, that you and I talked about, but is there anything that you wanted to share just in closing with the audience? Maybe your kind of 30-second elevator speech before I make a couple announcements and we transition to our next guest.
Yeah, I mean, I think we pretty much covered everything today. I'm looking forward to being a part of the solution as we move forward here with this unmanned industry. And we really don't know what the future looks like here, but we do know that we are going to need lots of help, lots of professionals, and lots of people to get out there to educate the public as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. So to me, Global Aerial Management Group is just a piece of that puzzle. And I want to be I want this company to be part of the bigger picture in integrating with the other unmanned and manned aviation companies as we further into this next future of what the air is going to look like. What is our airspace going to look like? It's really exciting.
I mean, you're already doing it. As you were talking to me, I thought of your new tagline, like part of the solution, underlying solution, literally, figuratively.
I love that, Dawn. You're so clever.
Seriously, I mean, especially with the drone disinfecting. I mean, I just think it's so great what you're doing. Everybody out there, thank you so much, Toni, for taking the time. Thank you also for sponsoring this particular episode. I've been walking around the floor here and trying to talk to people about there's so many amazing folks here, Toni, at AUVSI, and I would love to get so many of them on this podcast. So I know it's going to be a great end of year and a spectacular next year. But in the most immediate future, everybody, tomorrow, Clubhouse, new time just for tomorrow, just because I'm on a panel here about weather with the Weather Don Bershoff from True Weather, and Matt Rowland from the Fort Wayne, Indiana PD about managing weather and public safety ops. So that's going to be spectacular, but it conflicted with our normal Clubhouse time. So put this down on your calendars. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern. Not only are we going to have Paul Hewish from DroneHive talking about all the different ways that his service providers are supporting critical infrastructure, which is a big buzzword today. But we're also going to be having Brian Wynn, the CEO of AUVSI, and Michael Robbins. They're going to be joining us here in just a couple minutes after the brief intermission. But they're going to be on Clubhouse tomorrow as well. So join us on Clubhouse next week, same time, same place on Dawn of Drones. Okay. We are going to have Paul Hewish from DroneHive. So again, talking about critical infrastructure and some of the amazing things that his folks and his unique drone service provider model. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Toni. Everybody, have a great rest of your day. Stay on. We got Brian Wynn and Michael Robbins coming up here just in a couple minutes. Hope to see you there. And in the meantime, Toni, out here, thank you again.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks for having me.
Tuesday, and I can't remember what day it is now. I think that might have still been.
It's Wednesday. That was just yesterday.
I look at assured autonomy as the ideal. And that's the ideal we've been working toward. Some people would think of it as a goal. I think that we have a lot of goals between here and this ideal of assured autonomy. There's no question that everyone understands now that what we're trying to do in our community is going to require public acceptance. We can see that if we don't execute things correctly, then we set ourselves back because the public has reason to mistrust what we're doing with the technology. So we have to create trust and hence assured autonomy. And autonomy where vehicles are essentially ordering themselves is where we're trying to get to. So that's the ideal. I pulled out my old Earl Nightingale definition of success from the 1950s. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And I asked people in the audience to think about how successful we're being every day in progressing toward that ideal. So long-winded answer, but this is something we're going to be talking about for a long time and getting much more specific about how we define the successful steps along the way.
Well, we're getting to that ideal, and look, I've been walking around the showcase floor. I've been listening to some of the presentations. Absolutely spectacular, by the way. So many amazing people here, companies doing incredible things. We've come such a long way in autonomy, really just in the last couple of years. What would you say are maybe the top 3 use cases you're seeing in the autonomous world right now?
Well, as a recovering economist, I look at where's the economic pull for these technology solutions, because I've also in my career promoted technologies where it was more of a push. And I've discovered that it's easier if there's a pull. In this instance, there's both, because we're advancing some really great technologies. Where we're seeing it the most, I'm just going to stay with the easy economic pulls, is inspections, for example. And so many inspections covers an awful lot of ground, of course. But where we have been so far is being able to do vertical inspections. Now with the progress that we're making on beyond visual line of sight, we're starting to see the ability to do things in a more horizontal environment. And boy, oh boy, is there ever a lot of stuff that needs to be inspected on that basis. Of course, delivery is where we want to be. The beyond visual line of sight delivery of things, and we've had great examples of that, particularly of late, when we had to keep people at a social distance and we needed a more robust supply chain. So deliveries, beyond visual line of sight deliveries included, we're increasingly getting permissions to do those without chase planes, where it really starts to make a great deal of sense. And then I'll shift gears because we're surrounded by public safety people here. We've got a great drone responders event going on. We've been partners with them for a long time. Public safety, I mean, what a great message for our community. We're here to make you safer, and not big surprise that the public safety community has really been embracing this. And whether it's a cop doing an accident inspection in a much shorter duration of time, and not having themselves out on a busy road where there's already a great disruption, to all the way through to being able to go under bridges and do search and rescue out in places that are very, very inhospitable to people. This is a great technology that we're seeing in that respect as well. So that's, I would pick inspections, delivery, and then public safety, and it's in its many, many different forms.
And look, we're all here. We're in separate rooms right now. People are walking around with masks, and it's just so amazing to be able to get together live, in person at this event. I have to thank you, actually, because I have really grown my business in the last year during COVID. All of my colleagues, I've only known them virtually and online until like yesterday, literally. So thank you for what you're doing. And you all are doing an amazing job in all three arenas advocating for the community. Let's talk for a second and shift gears a little bit. I mean, we've seen, other progress. You mentioned beyond visual line of sight. So now we've got the BVLOS, right? Advisory rulemaking committee happening. We've seen in COVID drone deliveries really taking off as the ultimate social distancer, as you mentioned. What though would you say are maybe the top three, let's call them, I don't want to say negative, right? Challenges. What are the top three challenges that you see that we still need to overcome to really tap fully into the autonomous systems that we see on your floor here?
Was I going to take that one? Michael's the brains of the operation here.
For sure, AVSI would be in a lot of trouble.
I mean, we have. I'll just get us started here. I don't know if we can limit ourselves to three.
Yeah, three.
But we're up for whatever challenges are coming at us. I'm going to start with mentality. Right? There's a mentality among our policymakers and our regulators that basically says we can't make any changes to the system unless it's really, really justified in doing so. And that's not the mentality of the industry, by the way. We think that we have solutions that will make the airspace even safer than it is today. And I'm not just talking about for small UAS. I'm talking about for all aircraft. And the airspace needs to continue to be upgraded all the time. Technology, in the small, low and slow aircraft that I fly, has been advancing massively, and the ability to do things more safely in an aircraft today is just light years ahead of where I don't have to tell you, you're a former Air Force. So I look at it and I think about mentality as the first thing that we have to overcome in many instances, and we've seen great progress in that regard. Michael, over to you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and I would just add to that. I think one of the other challenges, but also an opportunity, is the breakthrough of the uncrewed industry and how we're approaching the risk calculation and how that's viewed by the regulator, which has always looked at things through a crewed lens. Aviation obviously has always had a pilot in command until our industry emerged, and to a certain extent, the FAA isn't built for the uncrewed industry. They're certainly working very hard and working very collaboratively with industry to make the necessary changes and to get up to speed. And obviously, the technology is evolving so fast. Don, regulation does not move fast, and often, the technology is outpacing the ability of the regulators to keep up, and the policymakers too, certainly. And when there's only an FAA bill every 3, 4, 5 years, if Congress can stay on time, it's really easy to fall behind. So we spend a lot of time at AVSI, trying to obviously educate and advocate policymakers and lawmakers. And we do that in a number of ways. Obviously, we maintain very close and active relationships throughout many offices within the FAA. And you were here yesterday morning for the keynote. Brian and Administrator Dixon had a great sit down and great conversation. Brian serves on a number of advisory committees and councils with the administrator.
So I have a badge at the FAA. I feel like I'm working for the FAA.
Wow, that's special.
It's important though, to have that.
You need the access, right? You need to be able to have these frank conversations, and it's great that they're happening.
Absolutely, and just as Brian talked about, how trust is an important part of public perception. Trust is also important between industry and the regulator. We spend a lot of time and resources maintaining those relationships and working to educate the regulator. At the same time, with lawmakers as well. Obviously, there's a lot of churn on the Hill, and there's a lot of issues that are demanding attention. But like the infrastructure package, presents great opportunity for our industry to capitalize on the dollars that will be hopefully made available if the bill actually gets passed for our industry to seize on that and build out digital infrastructure and other types of infrastructure that'll be necessary for the expansion of our industry. So we try and look at challenges as opportunities.
Yep.
And I think we're doing I think great work.
Well, I love that you're a glass half full kind of guy, because I'm generally a glass half full, half empty kind of gal. And but no, that's the way you need to look at it. Any challenge can be an opportunity. And I think you somewhat answered this next question. Let me back up for a second. You said a word there, Michael. I want to seize on it just for a second. You said uncrewed, and I know that's a movement right now. Across the industry. Change some of the gender specific language. Just want to throw the plug out there. Women in Drones is doing some great work. We just put out, my company P3 Tech just put out a diversity, equity, and inclusion survey for the industry. We'll get results to you all soon, but I'm really excited from some of the numbers I saw yesterday of people filling this survey out. I mean, it's a 15-minute survey and people are taking the time, which tells you something. So I look forward to having those continuing conversations with you. And but you also said, you kind of started answering this about some of the other things you do. Advocacy is one. What are some of the other things that AUVSI is doing to help with, bring repeatable and scalable autonomous operations really to full fruition? You talked about the advocacy piece. And obviously this conference is probably a great example as well, right? What else would you say that you all are doing to really help kick the industry up a notch?
Well, let me take that one, and let me take the opportunity to say I'm hoping you will be there. We have this afternoon a really good discussion going on, a workshop on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The initiative that we've launched on that is being headed by Mignon Hollis, who's going to do basically lead that workshop with us. And we're putting together, as we do everything at AUVSI, we're basically putting our, bringing our members together to talk about this, to see how can we be more inclusive as a community. And we know that we've got some work to do here, like all technology communities do. So I'm really eager to see the results of what you're doing. I would say the answer to your question as well, some of the other things that we're doing, although we are an advocacy organization first and foremost, some of the other things that we're doing are largely education based. And you can see from the design of this conference that it's not just our solution providers who are justifiably in love with their technology talking to each other. Right. Although there's plenty of that, and we had plenty of that during our virtual version in May. But primarily what we try and do here is take the users of the technology and have them talk to other users that are interested in the technology and learn from one another. A perfect example of this, we mentioned before, horizontal infrastructure inspection. You've got oil and gas people that do that with pipelines. You've got electricity utility people that do that with high voltage lines, and they can learn from each other and then swap information about what solutions work best, how they break that operation down, what are the different components of the system, what's the state of the art for the technology and the AI, so that they can basically benefit from what's available state of the art. To me, that's the best way to promote, to get us to mainstream with this technology, is to leverage the interest in these vertical industries and the vertical segments, try and get them together and basically learn from one another. That's what we try and do on this platform. That also creates a tremendous amount of goodwill in what we do 365 days a year, 24/7, which is advocacy. If I have to go before Congress, which I do, Michael makes me do as frequently as he can, and talk about things, and he does it a lot more than I do. If we can go up there with the oil and gas industry, with the movie makers, with the people that do construction, with the people that do mining. These are massive industries that are massive employers all over the country. We have that much more credibility. So all of these things they're all in our strategic plan. And I flatter us that we do a really, really good job. And I say we, I don't mean the staff. I mean, we as members and as a community.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned drone responders. I think that's also another perfect example where you had yesterday, Miriam McNabb moderated a panel, from DroneLife, moderated that panel of the SUAS manufacturers with all the law enforcement and public safety and EMS folks out in the audience, and just to hear, that dialogue and people asking questions, really, really awesome. And I agree everything you're saying, Brian, because education is something near and dear to my heart. It's really kind of the core of what I do in my company and why I honestly have this podcast. And I have to say, having been an Air Force member, as you mentioned, former military, your unmanned defense series is spectacular. And what I love about what's on the floor right now is it's not just civilian, civil aircraft and drones and robots. It's military, and everybody's out there together because, having straddled both worlds, I know the significant synergy between those two. And that they're symbiotic, and not one cannot exist without the other. I think AFWorks this morning, Colonel Diller, makes that clear, and all the things they're doing with all the primes and Agility Prime. But to see this in action is really great. So once again, thank you for all of that and for your advocacy. On that note, what would you say maybe is your biggest win this past year so far, in any respect, whether it's advocacy or otherwise?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think for the industry, the remote ID and operations over people rules and operations at night, having those rules published is clearly the biggest win for everybody in the industry, including AUVSI, which was at the forefront of helping to write the rules and then advocating for their release over a number of years. Without those rules, we wouldn't be having a conversation about beyond visual line of sight in a meaningful way. Brian's sitting on the rulemaking committee that you mentioned earlier for beyond visual line of sight. That rulemaking committee would not have been stood up if the remote ID rule had not come out. That was really the linchpin to more scalable, complex operations, as you mentioned earlier. And in fact, as you know, the operations over people and at night rule, that's largely been done for some time. And it kind of just had to sit on a shelf until the remote ID rule was published. And I think that will open up and has already opened up a lot of opportunity for industry to expand and take new types of operations. Obviously open up a lot more airspace and a lot more hours in the day for operations to take place. So clearly the remote ID rule was the biggest win for all of us, and just a huge step forward for the industry, and will enable so much more going forward.
Well, this year definitely started off with a bang with the cluster of those regulations, and I'm hopeful that, as we head into 2022, maybe we'll see maybe an NPRM on beyond visual line of sight or something. I don't know, maybe I'm being too hopeful there, but so what, kind of along those lines, what do you see on the horizon as maybe, let's just say one of the initiatives you may have in the hopper for us?
Well, I'll start off. We think that, we look at our initiatives a little bit later in the year, particularly from an advocacy point of view. The board of directors is having its September meeting. It's a multi-day meeting where we're going to be looking at some things and things that we've been working on at the staff level. I would say, just keeping it focused on advocacy, that and going back to my earlier comment about changing mentality, we want to telescope things out a little bit when it comes to the way risk gets evaluated. There are some very traditional ways that's been done that have worked very well for traditional aviation, but the discussion is starting to get a little bit more, I would say, a little bit more prominent about how do we take a more holistic view of risk. Michael, I know that's been discussed in the advocacy.
It has, yeah, and there's a lot of a lot of focus on this right now. It's certainly a part of the conversation within the rulemaking committee, but also the drone advisory committee, which Brian sits on, stood up a task group 11, to focus specifically on risk calculation as well. AUVSI has a working group on risk, and then the unmanned safety team also is working on risk calculation as well. So I think holistically everybody recognizes that one of the major enablers of again, the scalable, complex operations beyond visual line of sight will be ensuring that the risk calculation that the FAA uses enables the technology to meet its full potential. And we're certainly not there yet, and we're seeing that with the challenges and with the type certification process and the approval for operations. Is a number of companies are going through that process. The lens in which risk is calculated is still not quite right yet. It's still looking at that through that traditional aviation lens, but certainly I think the DAC task group indicates a willingness and an openness to change, and a recognition by the regulator that industry needs to be a big part of that conversation, and largely driving that conversation, because we have the data, we have the ability to prove out the safety case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, balancing safety, security, privacy, and full-scale operations. It's a wicked problem, but it's solvable, right? And so it's great to hear that industry is going to have a voice here, at the table, helping to educate, I think is the word, the buzzword of the day, to let people understand that we can do this maybe in a different way. I think that's going to be really critical. So we talked a lot about all the things you're doing, about this amazing conference you've put on. Do you want to talk a little bit about what else AUVSI brings to the table, and maybe why people should join?
The main thing that people join AUVSI for is networking. It's so much fun for me to walk around the show floor and see people talking to each other booth to booth. And we have very good analytics on the show that demonstrate that half of the value that even the people that are on the show floor get is by talking to other people on the show floor. So it's not just that we're bringing new customers, and we spend a lot of time developing partnerships with some of the organizations in these other vertical categories to bring new customers to the show, which is fundamentally, this is a trade show as well as a conference. But we try and do networking events in a way that the great diversity that's here from a business perspective is leveraged, and people can find the partners that they need. It's unmanned vehicle systems, and it's a system of systems that we're building now. So the partnerships are really, really the key. And I think I've been in the association world for multiple decades, I'll say it that way. The networking is always what matters most to people. And we are extremely, extremely intentional about the way we put our events together. Even in the virtual environment, we went out of our way to create features that allowed for people to network with one another. Not as successful as coming to an event like this and being face to face, but that's part of what we're all about.
And that's a great transition, maybe to talk for a second or two about what you expect to see in Orlando. So tell us a little bit about that future event that you all are going to host next year.
Well, the first thing I'll say is Orlando is going to come at us at high speed, because
it's not April, right?
We're going to be back. We're going to be back in our usual time slot, and with the blessing, as they say, and so that's a slightly shorter time horizon to plan in, but we're excited about being back in Orlando. I've been and done shows in Orlando, but not with this organization. But the organization has been in Orlando before, like we've been in Atlanta before. And Florida is a very, very progressive state, not just on the air side, but also on automated vehicles. In fact, we have Senator Brandes here from Florida, who's been a real forward leaner and leader down in Florida. So it's going to be a really good venue. It's going to be an exciting time, and I mean, as exciting as it is here, we know that we're going to be building back to the size and the energy. Well, there's plenty of energy here.
There's a lot of energy here.
Even more energy in Orlando. So, and I think the thing that we notice that gets a little bit more prominent each year, even though this is a drone podcast predominantly, is the multi-domain features that we see. There's actually an extraordinary number of maritime companies here. Huntington Ingalls is here, Austral is here, et cetera. And this is the first time we've seen the phenomenon of what we do in the advocacy arena, drawing these large, shipbuilding companies in to actually participate in our trade show. But that also tells you where the market is getting to in that particular domain. So you're going to see, I think, an increasing number of air and ground domain. Ground domain's been around for a long time, but we're starting to now branch into automated freight and things of that nature. So it's going to get more diverse from that standpoint.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we just have maybe 2 minutes left. So in that time, would you like to take an opportunity to make any closing comments before we sign off?
Well, I think the thing that I just want to emphasize for folks is that we do this not because we're in the trade show business. We do this because we're in the membership business. And I use the term community a lot because this community is made up not just of solution providers, but it's made up of companies like Amazon and BNSF and others that are using the technology, but have a very different primary business. And that's part of what makes AUVSI, I think, a unique opportunity. But I never let our people forget about the fact that we're here to serve our members and to make certain that we're creating value for our members and attracting more and more customers for them. So that's the reason why we're doing what we're doing our advocacy, doing the educational components, providing the platforms for people to learn from each other, and taking advantage of nice people like you, Don, who let us participate in your podcast. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thanks for being here. I mean, servant leadership is what it's all about. I've been doing that for a while, and I love that that's your mentality, to use your words, right back at you. So thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to maybe meeting you on the floor at some point before we head back our separate ways. But until then, thanks everybody. We're out here.
Thanks.